So to close the day and to point us towards a nature-positive future, I welcome to the stage our Brazilian director, Lucia Horta, as moderator of the panel. And joining her, we have Laura Jaguaribe, partner at Fama Re.Capital, Maria Eugenia Buosi, Director of Climate Ventures, and Megan Reilly Cayten, MD and Head of Carbon at Climate Asset Management. Women, please rise up.
Well, thank you. I guess we stand between you and cocktail hour. But it's an important moment. I planned most of the afternoon panels, but it was a great joy to see that from the morning on, we perceived that NbS is a real sector in Brazil, that the sector is growing. Yes, there is a lot of work to do, but it was great hearing that Brazil is part of the strategies, even of international players. And to me, that's very clear that climate challenge in Brazil now is no longer about ambition, it's about deployment, how we turn these conversations into real actions. But again, glass half full or half empty. I could pick from many examples from today. I'll go back to the 20 pitches that happened in the other room. Together, these 20 projects are raising over $1.4 billion, and there are many more projects, so it's very good to know. And the question now is, what needs to happen for this market to scale, and to scale fast? So my first question is to my friend Maria Eugenia. Looking across today's conversations, what do you see as the clearest sign that the Brazilian climate and NbS sector is entering a new phase?
Let me turn it on. No, it's on already. So thank you very much. It's been a tremendous pleasure to be here and to think about why do we think that it's entering a new stage of maturity. I believe the first thing is that we're talking about it. Because NbS concepts are complex, we need to translate them into mainstream financial markets, and I believe that's what we've been doing so far. So first thing, to talk about it, to put all the challenges on the table and see how we can deal with that. I think that has been addressed very well over the day. There's also a consensus that orchestration and communication are key to mend the gaps between projects and capital, between talk and deployment. And I also believe that it all has been addressed, and there is a will to collaborate, there is a will to do it together, and that I think will be the most important thing. We had the Secretary of Treasury, we had asset managers, we had banks, we had projects, we had project developers, we had everyone here trying to collaborate and see how we can build a bridge between these gaps and make capital arrive there. And I think investment decision in NbS is about opportunity. That became very clear here, and especially over this last panel. I believe it was fantastic. Alan mentioned Markowitz, and I love when people mention economic theory and investment theory to justify it. And I believe that it has also become clear that it's about a shift in risk-return perception. It's about resilience, it's about maturity, increasing maturity, not only by the projects, but by investors that have been trying to understand more deeply the concepts of NbS and the natural capital scenario. So I think it's obvious that Brazil is strategic and it is a potential leader in this agenda. And I'm very glad that we have two fantastic women leading investment in this that can contribute further to this discussion.
Thank you. That was a great summary of the good things that have happened. And now, what needs to happen for this to grow at the scale we need?
Perfect. So I think there is pipeline, there is capital, but it's not necessarily consistent in terms of standardization, metrics, and maturity. So this will be a requirement over the next months and the next years that we create a more comprehensive and more understandable set of metrics so that investors can understand more easily how to invest in NbS and how to measure impact and return on NbS projects. That I think will be one of the first things that we'll have to address. And also that capital wants to come to Brazil in a commercial and business way. So we need to demonstrate that we can have consistent and profitable growth in pipeline. We have pipeline, but do we have it over time? Do we have in the scale and the maturity investors need? How can we demonstrate that we not only have it as a stock, but we also can generate a flow of pipeline and projects to be invested? Last but not least, policy and institutions. Regulatory agenda needs to be prepared to this shift in capital flows. So discussing with ministries, with regulators, with associations. We have Roberta, for example, from Ambima over there. And we have other associations here that can support this regulatory and self-regulatory system. And I believe that we will create a base for us to improve capital flow to NbS. And that would be my remarks. But I think it was a tremendously successful event, and I'm so glad we did it.
Thank you. We do this to bring capital together, to build trust so that the capital can flow. But the real test, if we are doing the work right, if the country is moving right, is the investment test. How do investors react to this? And that's why we have two capital allocators here representing Brazilian investors and international investors. So let's start with Laura. From the perspective of Brazilian investor, what gives you confidence that NbS market in Brazil is entering a fundamentally new phase and a virtual cycle?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, Anna, to be part of this panel. It's always a pleasure. This event, I think, marks a very important landmark for us in the impact investing community, because it's a moment that we put everyone together in the same room and talk about these things. But to your question, I think there are many positive signs that we have been seeing in the past years that make us be much more confident about nature-based solutions investing. From an external perspective, I think the world is in such a different place than we were a couple of years ago. And themes such as energy security, food security, climate resilience, all of these are topics that can't be ignored anymore. And nature-based solutions are part of the solution for these problems. And when you think about Brazil, obviously, we're extremely well positioned to be part of the solution. Not only well positioned, I think really we're critical for a couple of these, for instance, food security. So as a Brazilian, it's really matching what we can deliver with what the world is asking for. From an internal perspective, there are also many signs that make us very optimistic, or cautiously optimistic, because I think that's also important. First of all, I think the amount of mobilization that we have been seeing in terms of different types of capital. So in the beginning, when we were talking about nature-based solutions, it was basically equity and high risk. Now we have equity, we have different risk profiles, we have blended, we have debt, we have concessionary, and a lot of this is a result of a huge effort that was done by policymakers to mobilize capital to this market, right? And this comes together with mobilizing capital for climate, but there has been specific attention to social bioeconomy and nature-based solutions. To just name two, Eco-Invest, which has been largely spoken of, but this started in 2024, so it's very recent. We are already in the fourth bid, going to the fifth, and the fourth one was focused on biodiversity. And BNDES, also to name a very important one, launched a climate request for proposal, and we just saw the finalists at the beginning of this year. I'm very proud to say that Fama was one of the 7 asset managers that was selected. This was a climate bid, but there was a specific nature-based solutions category. And to be frank, I remembered, because of your question, 1 year ago in this exact same event, before COP, we were talking about the importance of mobilizing capital to the projects locally. And we were saying how important it was to bring local capital to be able to unleash international capital. Now, this is not a topic because we've worked on it and it advanced so quickly. And just maybe to mention, another sign that I think is very interesting, we can't ignore, is the fact that traditional asset managers and traditional companies are looking toward nature. And we just had a panel, and this was the case. We had a couple of very big Brazilian asset managers that aren't focused on nature or climate, and now they have a nature vertical. And they have this because they're seeing that there are scalable projects and financial returns. So we have signs that can make us cautiously optimistic about nature-based solutions.
Great. And if you could give us some very concrete example of what feels investable today that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, like you mentioned, no one would consider.
Yeah, I think that's another of the optimistic, or at least signs that we have to take into consideration. The projects that we're seeing now have such a bigger aspect of pragmatism, awareness of returns, the themes such as offtakes and long-term contracts were not part of the conversation before, and now they are, because we have a broader understanding of what it takes for these projects to be profitable and resilient, and at scale. So a couple of years ago, you would see, obviously, nature-based solutions projects, but they would be niched, highly complex, not that profitable, not at scale. And now we see a lot of operators that have gone through this learning process and now are at a state of maturity in terms of knowing the business and being operationally capable of implementing the projects. That is very interesting for us as asset managers. So, yeah.
Thank you. Miga, can managed funds have investments in Europe, US, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Asia? And you tell me that shortly you're coming to LATAM. How do project development platforms in Brazil compare to other countries?
We, as you say, work all over, and useful perhaps to reference that we have two different strategies. So we have a natural capital strategy that does agriculture and forestry and developed markets. We have a carbon strategy that's focused on the global south. So our partners look very different typically within those two strategies. The partners that we find in Brazil are, compared to our other carbon partners, really stand out for operational diligence. I would echo what was just said in terms of understanding what it takes to scale, understanding the importance of supply chains, of nurseries, of seeds, of manpower. That was just discussed in the last panel. Really, the operational diligence is very important to us. We seek to invest in projects of $20 to $50 million total capital requirement, and we're looking for permanence, typically aligned with some commercial revenue streams. So we're really looking for operational expertise. That exists here because Brazil is such an agricultural and forestry powerhouse, and is so focused on the bioeconomy, and produces commodities in addition, obviously, to ecosystem services. So that's something that really stands out, and I think alongside that, you have the sophistication of those partners to speak to institutional capital like ours. We represent, or our clients include, very large tech companies and other corporates, and also include insurance companies and pension funds for whom this is one of their first investments in this space. They invest with us because they expect that we will meet their requirements. All of our funds are Article 9 funds under the EUS FDR. There is a reporting burden that comes with that. There's data transparency, and again, a level of rigor in implementation that is hard to find particularly in the carbon market, which has been so small and dominated by NGOs for so long. So we're really looking for people who really know how to grow trees and know how to talk to institutional capital. And there are not a lot of places in the world where you have that at the scale, certainly, that Brazil offers. So we're really impressed by the development platforms that are here.
Great. And we know that this sector has grown a lot in the past few years. But we are all anxious to see it growing much faster, and for that, we need international investors to increase their deployments in Brazil. In your view, what do you need to see to increase deployments?
Well, it's interesting. I mentioned we have two strategies. Our natural capital strategy, Brazil is not an eligible market for it. And I think the reason is that the goal with that strategy is to create nature as an asset class for very large institutional investors who have never done this before. And we decided, and this predates me, but the firm decided that adding on additional political and currency risk was just a step too far. And we wouldn't be able to reach the scale that we wanted to reach. That's not to say that's forever, but that is for our first vintage. So I think that is an indication of, the country risk premium is an indication of ongoing political and regulatory concerns. Brazil is so well poised to take advantage of the current global environment in terms of what's going on with the United States in its agricultural production, the relationship with China, the war. Brazil is incredibly well placed to benefit from that and rise, and I think that will help it address it. I know we're out of time, but I'll say very briefly, perhaps. In the carbon market, a lot of the projects, and one of the challenges we find is we invest typically in carbon at cost. We are very focused on operational efficiencies, and a lot of carbon projects in Brazil were designed for the premium Microsoft offtake. As that world shifts, I think the question is there a pivot? Should there be a pivot? What are the options that can scale in a world where you may not have that offtake available to the extent it has been in the past, but other offtakes will take that place. So I think that is a question. And will there be consolidation? I would expect to see some consolidation among market players here, which again will help attract larger scale international institutional capital. There is market demand for low carbon commodities, and I'm really interested to see that develop in Brazil. I think you have challenges in terms of people who want to invest in carbon, maybe don't want to invest in cows. Carbon capital all comes in a box, and figuring out how to do integrated, very complex systems with different levels of revenue exposure, I think is crucial to diversify your risk and is also complicated. And then, in terms of cost, so one of the reasons why we're shortly to invest in LATAM, and we've invested elsewhere, at least in our carbon strategy, is cost considerations, land tenure challenges, rep risk associated with community exposure. All of those things are more complicated here in some ways, but they're also just different. And so I think I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to be looking at opportunities in Brazil. And I would also just say, who doesn't love Brazil and Brazilians? So you've got an edge there. Everybody wants to come on the site visits here. And I'm sure what I've seen is the people who come down once always want to come back. And I see a lot of hope for growth in that.
Great, thank you. To me, it's very clear that we heard today that Brazil no longer suffers from lack of investors' interest. But what needs to happen now is that we need to move from commitments into deployment. And conversations like this one are a very important first step. But we need to move from conversations to term sheets. Because for those of us that have structured investments, when you sign a term sheet is when you solve most of the issues. And from a term sheet to a loan agreement, to an investment agreement, to the actual deployment, that's what truly matters. You are much closer than you were before. So there are two things that are also very clear to me. One size does not fit all, like we said here. Different investors want different things. And that's why tomorrow's matchmaking event is so important, because we are going to bring people together that have matching interests. And another thing very clear to me, and this event has been very successful, is that no institution can do this alone. We need collaboration, and 4 co-organizers together, many different project developers sharing their ideas and the side events and the various conversations make me very optimistic, even though a word of caution is always required, because we cannot rest. We need to keep moving. So if I am to close and invite you for drinks, we have come a long way. There is work to do, but I'm very confident we are on the right path. So thank you.